Near-mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
This is Mr. Chris Claremont, a legend.
Melanie goes,
Tired.
how's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today I get to talk about 10 more graphic novels that are standalone. You don't need to read anything before these, or you don't need to read anything after these. Unless, of course, you want to. So let's find out what made the list this year, 2023. And welcome back, everybody. So I have been doing this particular top 10 list for the last few years. Every year I talk about the 10 standalone graphic novels that require no prior reading and no reading afterwards. They are all in done, all in one book. And this year I have 10 more. Now, if you like these top 10 lists, I do a top 10 list every month of books that are coming out, graphic novels that are coming out. At the end of the year, I always do my favorite reads, my favorite graphic novels that were released in this year. And it's a lot of fun. And I probably need to update my top 10 image, my top 10 Dark Horse comics, just because licenses change and sometimes creators go somewhere else with their license. So yeah, maybe it's time to update, because I think those were done about 4 years ago. All right, in no particular order, this is not a countdown. Let's go ahead and start. But before I do, smash that like button, please. It goes a long way for us here on the channel, and it is a very small thing you can do, but it means the world to us. And a big thank you to our patrons for making videos like this possible. Could not be doing this without you all. If you see something here on the list that piques your interest, by all means, let me know in the comments. If you have your own top 10 list, but make sure you watch the other videos, because I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years now. So make sure you watch those videos, just in case you're like, why didn't this idiot put this on the list? Well, that's why, because that past idiot put it on the list. Let's go ahead and start. Kicking off the list this year is Seconds, a graphic novel by Bryan Lee O'Malley and published by Ballantine Books. Now, if you're a fan of the Scott Pilgrim movie or the Netflix series, or you may have read the graphic novel, this is the same creator. He's got that same chibi-sized artwork for all of his characters in here. This one's a little bit different, though, than Scott Pilgrim, and this is all in just one book, beginning to end. So this is the story of Katie Clay. She's a very talented young chef. She runs a successful restaurant, and she has big plans to open a better restaurant, a bigger restaurant. However, her world starts falling apart, because that's just what life does. You have her ex-boyfriend that pops up, and it's starting to bring up emotions in her, even though she's currently kind of seeing another chef. And so her little fling with this chef kind of goes south. Her best waitress ends up getting hurt, so she ends up just realizing that her world isn't as perfect as it is, and yet she's still trying to open up this restaurant. Now, through happenstance, she finds one night in her bedroom a very strange box that is in her dresser. When she opens up this box, she finds a kit for undoing bad decisions. So there are certain rules for undoing bad decisions that require some time travel. This is where it gets really interesting. Step 1 is write down your mistake, your error, in this little notebook. Step 2 is eat a mysterious, I think it's a red mushroom, that appears in there. And step 3, go to sleep. Step 4 is wake up, and your life has changed. You get to do it all over again. Simple, yet addictive, because once Katie finds more of these mushrooms underneath the restaurant, she finds herself using them night after night, trying to fix every little mistake that she's made throughout the day. Now, there is a house spirit that I didn't even mention that kind of warns her. She's pretty upset that she's been doing this time travel in an irresponsible manner, that you can't alter history like this, because the very fabric of reality begins to break down whenever she starts using these mushrooms over and over again. Now, Katie has to learn the hard way that every moment is precious. And this was such a nice book. This almost actually made it in my top reads of 2020 or 2021 whenever I first read it, but it was bumped off by another book, but I never forgot it, and I always wanted to come back and talk about it on the channel, and now I got my chance. It is available in hardcover format, and it is available in softcover format. And like I said, if you're a fan of Bryan Lee O'Malley's artwork and his type of storytelling, you need to check this one out. Or if you just want something that has sci-fi elements, like, what was it, Run, Lola, Run? Like that type of story, or I guess Back to the Future, with consequences, this is the one for you. Two Brothers by Gabriel and Fabio Moon, published by Dark Horse Comics. Now, this one, unlike Seconds, it has mature content. Seconds, I would say, is teen plus. But this one definitely has mature tones in it. And it is the story of two brothers, and it's interesting because Gabriel and Fabio Moon are brothers, but they're not the two brothers in here. If you're coming here because you love Day Tripper, or you've heard me talk about Day Tripper, and you've read it yourself, and you're like, oh, it's the same creators, I gotta go check this out. It's not the same type of story. As a matter of fact, the story in here is done in black and white, and it's more of a historical piece, and it's actually an adaptation of Milton Hatum's novel. So the story starts off with this prologue that introduces us to the character named Zana, who is the mother and wife throughout this particular story. And then we jump forward to the end of World War II, where we have one of the brothers, Yaqub, returning back from Lebanon because his family sent them away. And his twin brother, Omar, stayed in Brazil. Now, you get to find out why both of the brothers are separated at an early age. And as soon as Yaqub returns from Lebanon, you definitely see that emotional and physical wound from his last encounter with Omar. Now, as you keep reading, the story gets darker, and it becomes about the two brothers and what happened in the past, why they are at each other's throats, and how the family reacts to that, how the family fell apart. And I love the fact that it takes place after World War II, and we're talking about, a location that it's one that I'm not really familiar with during that particular time. So I love timepieces like this. It's a mystery as to who is even narrating the beginning of the story. So it's a mystery throughout the whole thing. Of course, there's women involved that get both of the brothers separated, but is that really the reason why they are enemies and clashing with each other at all times? The art in here is excellent. Even though it's not in color, it has a lot of use of just negative space and that atmospheric use of black that just sets the tone of the book. It's full of energy, detail, and just wonderfully drawn. I really enjoyed this one. It's a lot different than Day Tripper, like I said, but I think that's what ends up happening. Most people end up comparing it to that book and expect the same kind of story. And that's not what you get out of this. It is available in hardcover, and it's also available in trade paperback. Killing and Dying by Adrian Tomine, published by Drawn and Quarterly. And the very first thing I want to note about this book, it is available in hardcover, is this plastic sleeve. I just think it's so cool. That's why you're probably seeing a glare with the lights shining on it. But I think that's a really nice touch. Now, the stories in here are so different. So if you don't like the first one, please stick with it, because each one of them is different in the way that it's drawn with the different panels, and each one is different in tone with just the mood that he sets for the stories. Definitely mature rating because of a couple of stories in here. So it is an anthology of 6 different stories, and I'm not going to spoil if they're connected or not. You can find out for yourself. I love when people find like the small little things that link stories together, but you feel free to connect them by yourself. And each one of them is unique in their own way. Like I said, drawn differently, and even the stories are differently done. So we have a brief history of the art of horticulture, which is a story about a man that gets obsessed with this new art form that he creates with plants growing in between a bunch of junk really in his front yard. Meanwhile, it kind of has a strain on his marriage. Then you have Amber Sweet, which deals with the struggle of identity. This was really interesting. This is about a young lady who finds out that she has a famous doppelganger. However, her famous doppelganger happens to be in the adult industry, and now she's trying to get her life back. Go Owls, I think, is still my favorite one in here. It's about 2 people, an older gentleman and a young lady. And then the twist is that he's not even that much older. He just looks rough. But they meet in an AA meeting, and they have all these connections immediately. And you really don't know how long the story takes place. You don't know if it's years. There's a lot of secrets between them, and I don't know. I like human connections, and I really enjoyed that story. It's a very powerful story. Translated from the Japanese is so freaking unique. It's the shortest one in here. It's like 7 pages. You don't even get to see the main characters in it. It's all told through objects. Killing and Dying, which is, of course, the title of the book, is about this untalented 14-year-old, this one breaks my heart, who wants to be a comedian, and meanwhile something horrible is happening in the background as you're reading about her own problems. And then you have Intruders, which closes out this collection. I think that one's probably the most darkest one in here. It's all in black and white, and this one's about a veteran that's trying to return to his old life in normal ways, but then things turn sinister. And as I mentioned, the stories could be interconnected, but you can find out for yourself. It's a mixed styles of stories, anywhere from humor to dark comedy to some serious stuff in here, and some stuff that even pulls at your heartstrings. Absolutely recommending this one. I can't believe I haven't had a chance. I don't know. I don't go back and watch my videos. I may have talked about this one in the past. But if case I haven't, and you're watching this, definitely go and try this out. It's a wonderful book, available in hardcover. I think that's the only way it's available. Maybe it's because of this plastic sleeve, but available in hardcover format. The Twilight Man, Rod Serling and the Birth of Television, published by Humanoids, but also Life Drawn, I think, is the new publisher, and drawn and written by Koren Shadmi. My wonderful wife, the astonishing Melanie, bought me this book a few years ago because she knows I love reading comics, all kinds of comics, and she knows how much I love the Twilight Zone. As a matter of fact, the Twilight Zone here in this household is played every New Year's Day, non-stop. We put in our favorite Blu-ray and just let it play. And my daughters all love it, and my wife does too, and we're just big fans of the show. So this is a really interesting graphic novel because even though it's a story about Rod Serling, there could be a couple of twists in here that reminds you of the classic Twilight Zone episodes. So it all starts off on this plane ride where Rod Serling is sitting next to this young lady, and the plane is due to land in about 4 or 5 hours. So they got enough time to kind of get to know each other. So she starts asking him about his past. She's like, "You look familiar," and he's like, "Well, I'm in the entertainment industry." But you get to find out everything from the beginning, like when he was enlisted in the army, when he was a paratrooper, how he wanted to be a boxer, and all these things he wanted to do, eventually leading him into the world of radio and television, and then eventually leading him into the world of the Twilight Zone, and what made it so good and special and so true, and where a lot of these stories came from, where the inspirations came from. He saw a lot of horrible things when he was in the war. And that is one thing. This one's probably rated older teen, mainly due to the violence, just because of some of the things that he's seen in his life. But oh my gosh, if you're a fan of the Twilight Zone and you have not had a chance to read this, rectify that. You need to read. It's so good. Like it's one of those books I couldn't put down. And when I got to choose the 10 books for this year, I got really excited when it came to this one because I'm like, oh, I'm just going to read it cover to cover. I don't have to because I've read it so many times. Whenever I travel, I take it with me. Especially if I'm on a plane ride, just because. But I think that it's just such a good book that I want to keep rereading it. And each of the chapters is drawn, like there's a character that appears from a Twilight Zone episode in each of the chapter titles. Available in trades and available in a hardcover format. X-Men, God Loves, Man Kills by Chris Claremont and Brent Anderson, published by Marvel Comics. How in the world is someone calling themselves the Uncanny Omar and not talk about the greatest X-Men comic that also happens to be a graphic novel? So, in case you're wondering, what the hell is he doing up there talking about an X-Men book when these are standalone graphic novels? Stay with me. This book was originally published as a graphic novel. As a matter of fact, it was the Marvel graphic novel line, and this was number 4. And those were meant as standalone stories that you didn't really need to read anything before or after. But oh my gosh, when you read this, at least 95% of the people that I've recommended this to, and I know that's a pretty accurate number, you'll want to read more X-Men. It is just such a hook for X-Men. It's the one story that I recommend to everybody because to me it is the epitome of what an X-Men story should be. It's got all the love, the loss, and the hardship that these characters go through. So really quickly, what this is the story of the X-Men set during this particular time in the 80s, where we have Reverend Stryker just preaching against mutants. So it's a hate group that is going around and killing mutants just because they are different, just because they were born with a different DNA. And it is so powerful. Like, I will say, this is definitely for... I read it when I was 12 and I was blown away. At 12 years old, I never thought I would read anything as good in the world of X-Men. And honestly, I haven't. I mean, there are things that are great. I love X-Men. Nothing has come near this book, though, as far as how powerful this was. Because there's some really rough imagery through here. And everybody, of course, is different with their kids, right? You may not want your kid reading this. Because there are children that die at the beginning of this. Because they're mutants. They're being hunted down. Gunned down with their parents. And they're left hanging on the swings where Magneto finds them. Magneto, the villain. But Magneto has ties to the Holocaust, right? So it goes deep into the character of Magneto. So Magneto and the X-Men team up in this story to take down this group of hateful human beings that are killing mutants. And the whole reason that William Stryker is killing them to begin with has his own twist. Now, there is derogatory language in here, like racial slurs in here. In the gallery edition, those have been censored out. So if you want the original uncensored version, they are found in the omnibus editions, in the Marvel Masterworks, in the Epic collections. Is the Epic out? I don't think the Epic's out. In those formats. And I feel like when I was a kid reading that, it showed you just how powerful words could be. So, like I said, everybody's different. Like, every parent's different. You know, you want to keep your kids away from that. More power to you. I respect that. But to me, the comparison between the derogatory terms they use for mutants and the derogatory term they use here for African Americans, like, it was just such an eye-opener for a kid. And to this day, I'll never forget that lesson. A beautifully drawn story that was originally supposed to be drawn by Neil Adams, but hey, that's another story. And this actually was the template for X2, the X-Men United, the movie. Even though they took a lot of liberties with the movie, even though I do like that movie. But this, oh my gosh, so good. Available in trades, Marvel Premiere hardcovers, this gallery edition, like I said, it was censored. And then the Omnibus Volume 3 is what you're looking for, as well as the Marvel Masterworks. But, oh my gosh, absolutely. Now, if you're enjoying any of the books that I'm talking about, or you're curious about reading them, check out our sponsor.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code Near Mint Condition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
And before I continue, I always love plugging this book right here, Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. It is an eye-opener for you if you've ever wanted to dive into the world of graphic novels. All right, let's continue with the list. Fun Home, a family tragicomic by Alison Bechdel, published by Mariner Comics Classics. Now, I have talked about this one in the past. I think it was a video I did last year of comics or graphic novels that make me cry. And this is one that I brought up. This one has mature content in here as well. I believe this is required reading for some classes in college, which is really great to see graphic novels get that, like required reading. I know Amazing Amanda, my co-host, told me that she had to read it in college, which is really interesting because I had just read it because it looked like an interesting read. But hey, whatever gets people to read graphic novels, I'm all for that. Now, the title's a little misleading because there is really nothing fun about this home. And the title comes from the fact that the family in here, this is all Alison's story, by the way, it's a memoir, owns a funeral home. So, of course, the kids in the family call it the fun home. And even though it's about the family, the story really is about Alison and her father, who is the owner of this funeral home, also happens to be a part-time English teacher, also happens to just be a handyman, like fixing things around the house. And it is done in a non-chronological way. So you get the story when she's 10 years old, starts off with this beautiful story about her father just lifting her up and in his arms, and it just reminded me a lot of the connection I have with my daughters. And then it jumps into her college years. And you find out through here that they're not really talking to each other anymore. As a matter of fact, there is a almost hatred towards her father. This thing that happened that has kind of separated them in the past. And as you're reading through here, through her past, you get to find out that her dad had treated his family like garbage. And part of the reason that he was treating them like that, it was because he was unhappy with himself. You find out through here that he was a closeted gay man. And there was a lot of rage built in that he took it out on his family. And she is actually the opposite. When she went to college, she came out as a lesbian. And you figured that would connect them, that would bring them together, but it doesn't. It kind of just drives them apart. And as life would have it, she never really gets the moment to reconnect with her father because he is taken from her and her family. He ends up dying. And you can find out for yourself how, because that opens up the mystery of what exactly happened to her father. And also opens up the idea of how is she going to reconnect with somebody that is no longer here. I really enjoy the story. It will pull at your heartstrings. If you have kids, it will definitely remind you of the relationship that we have with our children and how precious time is. I cannot recommend this one high enough. It is available in trade paperback, and it is also available in hardcover format. Just be prepared to do some crying. Just letting you know. In by Will McPhail, published by Mariner Books. This was such a nice surprise in 2021. I believe it's his first graphic novel, but he had been working for newspapers, and you never know what to expect. But it was something about the cover that just made me want to read it, and I fell in love with the story. Now, this is another one that has mature themes. It is another one that is it's sad yet hopeful at the same time, and it is so hard to describe, but I'm gonna do my best because I want people to read this. This book right here, out of the entire list, reminds me why I love the graphic novel format, because there's no way a movie or a book could do this story justice. It can only be done in this format, and you'll find out why here in a second. This is the story of Nick. Nick is an artist, and Nick is also a loner. He has no idea how to connect to people. He's close to his mom and his sister and his nephew, but it's like he has no idea how to interact with other human beings. He works by himself a lot. His neighbors would say all he does is watch porn and listen to Joni Mitchell records, which he does admit that's all he does. He's like, I like to listen to Mitchell after I watch porn. Oh, man. But what happens through here, by the way, it is very important to note that the story is all done in black and white until certain moments happen. What happens through here is that you find out that when he's a kid, he just reached this, this state of bliss, maybe? I don't know how to describe it. When he was at the water park and he went down this funnel slide. And it's like this blissful solitude, and it's all encaptivated with color. Now that he's an adult, he's crafted this life of independence and doesn't really work with anybody, works by himself, and he does occasional freelance jobs for ad agencies, but he doesn't have human interactions. And then he forgets how to interact with people. We forget, and I say we because this happens to me a lot too, I work by myself, we forget that we have to have a human experience to keep us going. And no matter who is thrown at him, there's another character named Ren that shows up through here, and she takes an interest in Nick, and he takes an interest in her, but it still remains in black and white. Of all the people that break this trend, it's the plumber that comes to his house to fix the leaking in his toilet, that they both have a connection, and his world turns into color. And that just made me laugh that, like, you know, he's having relations with this lady, that does nothing, but for some reason this plumber says the right thing. You can find out what it is in the book, and it just opens his world to this colorful bliss that he just remembers from his childhood. And the more he talks to people, the more the world opens up again. Now, there's bad things that happen in his life, but it's still the message of having that human connection. No matter who it's with, whether it's a plumber or whether it's his nephew, you're looking for it. And I thought that was so good. And again, it's a book that you couldn't really do as a novel or a movie or a TV show. So I'm glad that it's sticking into this format of graphic novels. That's why I love this medium. Available in hardcover format only. If you haven't read it, even if you're not artsy, definitely recommend it for you. V for Vendetta by Alan Moore and David Lloyd, published by DC Comics. I just reread this year. I've read this book 3 times in my life. Once when I was, I can't remember, at 12, 13, 14, something like that. It did nothing for me. The second time was when I came back to comics. I was in my 20s, right after my divorce, and I needed to go back to the world of comics. And I had heard this one is so amazing. Everybody kept hyping it up. I loved Watchmen. I loved Swamp Thing, but still didn't click with me. I bought the trade paperback and nothing. I'm 45 years old as of this video. And when I read this year, it just clicked with me in ways that it hadn't before. And every time I talk about this book on my channel, people were wondering, like, why don't I talk about it like I love it? And I was just being honest. I didn't until this year. And it's weird, maybe it's one of those things that, for me at least, you have to be the right age to read something in order for you to be impacted by it. Maybe. Or revisiting movies and video games, whatever it is. But it did it for me. So, really quick, this is the story of a Britain, a possible future, not really a future because it's set in 1997, but a Britain that has fallen apart, that has become this fascist government, and it has taken over. And they're using fear to rule, whether it's through surveillance programs or detention camps, as they like to call them, for the undesirables. And the undesirables can start as anything, right? Like, it could be people that don't look like you. It could be people with different skin colors. It could be people with different sexual orientations. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they create these camps for these people that make them go away. Eventually continents fall apart just because of this particular world. So there is a man, we'll just call him V because that is his code name, that has taken it upon himself to become a terrorist, bombing and just destroying the parliament and overthrowing this government to restore freedom for the people. And through the very first few pages, we get to meet this young lady named Evie Hammond. She's 16 years old, and he kind of, after saving her life, he takes her under his wing. And through her, you get to see who V really is and what he represents. And, you know, you ask yourself, is it her father that disappeared years ago? Or is it just a complete stranger? Or is it multiple people? Or does it even matter? As long as the message is V and freedom. Oh, man, if you've never read this and you've seen the movie, this is different. This dives a lot deeper than the movie could have. And I'm so glad that DC decided to reprint the Absolute Edition, because that's the way I ended up picking it up. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a chance to reread it. I would have waited years to reread it. So glad that they reprinted it so I could talk about it in a video in more detail if you want to go and watch that. But available in Absolute Edition, available in trade paperbacks, standard size hardcovers, deluxe editions. It's been available in a lot of formats, and yeah. Check it out. You may be 20 years old and love this book, and I just wasn't ready for it until in my 40s, apparently. The Best We Could, an illustrated memoir by T-Boy and published by Abrams Comics Arts. This one here is, I would say this is teen plus. And I've talked about this on my channel before, but I don't think I've talked about it enough. So here it is as a standalone graphic novel. This is the story of T as she remembers coming to America and, you know, having her own child, marrying an American man. They come from Vietnam. Her parents are immigrants. She herself is an immigrant. And then here you get to find out about her parents' past. And I love that about this book, right? As an immigrant myself, and my parents are immigrants from Peru, a lot of this really hit close to home. Them spending the nights in a small little hotel. But before we talk about coming to America, she goes deep into the history of her family lineage, where her mother comes from, where her father comes from, and the start of the Vietnam War, when it was just North and South, and then the different groups that separated from each other, and betrayal, and just all these horrible things that were happening to people, and what, oh my gosh, what her mother and father had to do to survive. You know, there is, I will say as a trigger warning for some people, there is the loss of children in here. There's kids that get harmed through here because that is the life that her parents were, you know, they were living. But all you see at the beginning is how angry her mother is, how distant her father is, and you're like, oh man, these people are a bunch of jerks. But you forget they were people. They were young ones, and they weren't always these shells of who they once were. I thought that was wonderful because, you know, I think of my parents and how different they were in Peru than they are here. Here, my daughters are like, oh, it's Mimo and Papu, they're coming over. They were so different down there. And it's so interesting to take a look at, you know, her mom and dad's life. And then, yes, coming over to America, being separated, having a host family, and then, yes, sleeping in a little tiny apartment because that's all they can afford. Her mom having 2 jobs, her dad, well, you can find out for yourself. I don't want to go into detail. I love this book, and I hope you enjoy it too. Not just for immigrants or children of immigrants. I think this book is such an important story to tell. And like, there's this whole scene where there's a fire that happens, and if you don't have anything and your home burns down, what are you even left with? It's so touching, so powerful. It moved me in ways that, well, a lot of graphic novels do move me, but in different ways, just because I can relate to a lot of the things that she went through. Available in hardcover and in trade paperback format. It is a beautiful book no matter which route you decide to read it in. The Collected Essex County by Jeff Lemire, published by Top Shelf Publishing. This is a story, I think this one here is probably teen plus. I think every year I talk about a Jeff Lemire book. And then on my channel, I'll go on about how much I don't really like his art. I guess, I don't know. It's starting to grow on me because I really enjoyed this book on my second read through. By the way, big shout out to my buddy Aaron Cobbs. He bought this for me for my birthday. That was so sweet, so unexpected. But this story is about Essex County, which is a county in Canada. It doesn't matter where it is because that's not important. What's important is that this is an anthology of stories. And I will say these are a little bit more connected than the Killing and Dying book. There's 3 main stories. The first story is about Lester, who is a kid living with his uncle. You found out that his mom had cancer, passed away, and she left his uncle to take care of this boy. He's into superheroes. He's into Superman, drawing his own comic. And it's adorable, right? Because he still has that imagination that kids have that unfortunately goes away after a while. And then there's a gas station clerk, or the guy that owns a gas station, that plays a part in this story too. And I don't want to spoil what happens, but he does give him a free comic book. And hey, that goes a long way for me. You give a kid a free comic book, that does a lot to a kid. And he plays a big part in this that just melts your heart, and you can find out by reading the first story. The second story is about 2 brothers. One moves to Toronto, plays in the hockey league, invites his other brother to come. His other brother comes and plays hockey because they're both big guys and they're both into hockey, and they both can be somebody. His younger brother, though, brings his girlfriend, fiance with him. And the older brother ends up kind of crushing on her, and they have a little bit of a thing that leads into this whole drama in this family between the two brothers that drives them apart, and how stubborn some of them can be. And it's beautifully done in this, just the framing and the pacing of the story, and how unfair life can be, and how it takes from you. Even though when you think you've got it, you're back, and no, oh, so good. And then the third story is about the nurse that goes from place to place. She's a widow. She's living with her son. But through her, you get to find out the history, like a little bit of the history of not just her family, but Essex County. Now, there's a couple of other short little stories at the end that you don't really have to read, but they are fun, and they're kind of connected in different ways. Yes, I love that I get to wrap up this list this year with this story. If you've not read it and you've read other works, I've talked about Jeff Lemire on my channel before, and many of his books. You probably, I think, did I put Underwater Welder in my list last year? Maybe I did. Anyway, definitely check this out if you haven't had a chance to read it. Now, if you're interested in any of the books I talked about throughout the list, check out our sponsor, CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know near mint condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And those were my top 10 best standalone graphic novels for the year 2023. In the comments down below, let me know what you think are the best standalone graphic novels that nobody should miss. What from this list you disagree with, if you're like, oh wait, that actually makes you want to read some more, so it's not really standalone, like X-Men God Loves, Man Kills, but hey, I can't help if people get hooked. And more importantly, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you to our patrons for making videos like this possible. And don't forget to smash that like button. Check us out. We put out videos every day, so make sure you've rung that bell for notifications. That's it, everybody. Keep on reading. I will see you probably later today with another video, and tomorrow for sure. And every Saturday we do a live stream at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is our Q&A. We have a lot of fun there if you've never joined us. But that's it, everybody.